We're doing. Hello? We're doing sexual selection. Liam.
So that's Liam. My name's Daniel. All right, so we're gonna start off with a simple question. Let's actually we got this right here. Never mind that. I wrote it, Stephen. I'm joking.
Okay, so sexual selection is a
Back, sorry.
Oh, do you want?
All right, so let's start with the simple activity. What do you guys think sexual selection is? You guys, we didn't give you guys the handout yet, so what do you guys think it is? Get some ideas going.
Who mates with who?
Who mates with who? Something like that. Tatiana.
Why they mate with certain people, like not people, but things.
Correct. Well, like, the sort of idea is like what makes one animal want to mate with another animal. Like how to attract other mates. That's the whole idea behind sexual selection. So, Steven, next slide.
So, sexual selection is a type of natural selection in which traits become more or less common based on an animal's ability to mate with more or better partners. So, well then, what is? Oh no, actually, no. You go.
What?
Sometime left.
Ready? All right. So, for sexual selection, basically there's some pros and cons for sexual selection. The pros are if you're a male, you get to mate more, which is a pretty obvious thing. And you get more chances to pass on your genes, and you live a more fulfilling life, whatever. But when you're a female, you get children who actually have better attributes, because it's usually the female who's picking the mate. So you get like, I don't know, guys who are taller, or animals who are stronger, or smarter, or just look better than other animals. But there are some cons to sexual selection. Like, for example, the Irish elk. It sort of looks like our Canadian moose, except its horns are massive. And the thing is that they were so obsessed with that, they sort of screwed themselves over by mating with animals whose horns were absolutely giant. So by doing so, they hindered themselves, they couldn't get away, and they pretty much killed themselves off. So they're extinct now, which sort of sucks, but...
So, well then...
And then we're going to also talk about natural selection, which is what sexual selection is. It's a type of natural selection.
So, natural selection is how traits become more or less common based on an animal's ability to survive and gather resources. They're both very similar. The only difference is that for sexual selection, the survival of the animal relies on how attractive they are to the opposite sex. But for natural selection, it relies on how well an animal can hunt and survive and gather resources. Now we're going to look at a video where birds, through natural selection, evolved to have longer bills, which make gathering resources much more efficient.
Next slide. Or
Next slide. Oh, or escape. Okay.
So let's turn the volume up first.
Please. Can you turn the volume up? It's not plugged in.
Oh, it's not? Yeah, where's the cord? Where's the green cord? Seem to be having some technical
right here.
difficulties.
This
Oh,
one.
sweet. Thank you. Where
Other
is it?
side.
Where's the headphone jack? Here it is. This is... Alright.
Easier to raise young. Females can raise chicks on their own, freeing up.
Bring it back 10 seconds.
Or sorry.
Okay.
To 4?
Yeah. Sweet.
These new bills have improved their diet so much that it's easier to raise young. Females can raise chicks on their own, freeing up males for the mating game. And in this food-rich environment, sexual selection can become a more dominant evolutionary force. How food is distributed, whether it's clustered or dispersed, can have a dramatic effect on what kinds of traits will be favored by sexual selection. Let's look at two situations, one that leads to male-male competition and one that leads to female choice. First, male-male competition, which will demonstrate with the trait burly.
Wait,
All right, YouTube.
When a primary food source, like fruit trees, are clustered, males can defend territories around them to gain exclusive access to the females who come there to eat. A male who is born burly is better able to defend a territory and will be able to mate with more females. Thus, burly males will have more offspring, and their genes will become more common. Each generation of males will get burlier and burlier to the point of impacting their survival. Females who mate with burly males benefit in two ways. They have access to the food they need, and their sons are more likely to be burly and successful. But females don't get burly since they were already the right size for survival, and there is no advantage for them to carry this extra weight. Natural selection and sexual selection are pushing females and males into very different forms. And this difference between the sexes is a telltale indicator of sexual selection at work. Now let's look at mate attraction, specifically female mate choice. This kind of selection happens most dramatically when bountiful resources like fruit are spread out and impossible for males to defend. Instead, males must try to attract females, convincing them that they are the best possible mates. A male who is born fancy might have an ornament that he uses to attract females. If the ornament works, and more females choose to mate with him, then the genes for fancy will be passed on. Fancy traits may be innately appealing to females, or they may reveal something about the male's underlying health. In either case, these genes give rise to fancy males and females who prefer mates with those particular genes. Each generation, males become more elaborate until the traits significantly decrease their chances of survival. And just like our first situation, the females don't change because natural selection still favors their camouflage coloration.
What was
To sum up, classic natural selection leads to adaptations for gathering resources and surviving. Sexual selection leads to adaptations for gathering mates and breeding. These two kinds of selection may seem different, but the mechanism behind them is actually the same. The competition to leave more copies of the genes in the next generation. Evolution is never ending, with recombination and mutation creating new traits every generation. Most of these will die out, but those traits that provide an advantage in the competition to breed inevitably become more common over time, sometimes transforming the drab into the magnificent.
Next slide. Alright, so now we're going to go over the types of sexual selection.
So there are two general types of sexual selection, intrasexual and intersexual. Intrasexual selection is usually between males. Members of the less limited sex, which are usually males again, compete aggressively among themselves for access to the more limited sex. The limiting sex is the sex which has the higher parental investment, which faces the most pressure to make a good mate decision. Intrasexual selection drives the selection of attributes that allow alpha males to dominate their own breeding partners and rivals. These attributes are called secondary sexual characteristics. I'll talk a little bit more about this later. And intersexual selection is between a male and a female. Males compete with each other to be chosen by females, and for intersexual selection to work, one sex must evolve a feature that the other sex finds alluring. So, where did this theory come from? This concept came from the fact that animals were evolving features that weren't practical for surviving or reproducing, like the bird you saw before. An example of this would be the bird's elaborate colors. These colors obviously wouldn't help the bird survive if it were in a situation where a predator were hunting it down. But it will help the bird become more attractive to other birds and reproduce. The interest of male, next slide please. The interest of male and females are different when it comes to reproducing. Males are interested in mating with a large number of completely faithful females, while females are interested in mating with a large number of